Good morning and namaskar to one and all. On behalf of the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India, I welcome all of you to this August gathering for taking forward the commitment of the Union Budget 2021 to strengthen and boost the science technology innovation ecosystem in India. This parallel breakaway session is on using Glue Grant to develop Education Hub. It is a part of the webinar series on harnessing education, research, and skill development for an Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is initiated by our Honorable Prime Minister. It is overwhelming to see how the leadership of this country is proactive and committed in building a technologically self-reliant India. We have with us a stellar panel of eminent experts and practitioners to discuss and deliberate on various aspects of STI in order to build a roadmap for realizing the spirit of Vigyan Se Vikas. So let us begin today's discussion. Without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Akhilesh Gupta, Head and Advisor of the PCPM Division in DST, for his welcome remarks. Over to you, Dr. Gupta.
Thank you, Professor Ashutosh Sharma, Secretary DST, and the Chairman of the session, distinguished panelists of the session, my colleagues in DST and Office of PSA, a large number of participants and invitees joining this session from across the country. A very good morning to one and all. I, on behalf of Department of Science and Technology and on my own behalf, welcome you all to this very important panel discussion. As you know, Government of India announced a number of schemes and initiatives as part of the Budget 21-22. Some of these budget announcements relate to the science and technology and also education, like the establishment of a national research foundation, a launch of a deep ocean mission, launch of a national language translation mission, also a hydrogen energy mission, new Space India Limited, a PSU under the Department of Space, and last but not the least, an umbrella structure for 9 cities for building better synergies among the institutions, both in the R&D and academic institution. In order to develop plan of action for the implementation of these schemes and missions, a series of webinars are being organized today, parallelly. Today, all 6 of them are now going parallelly running. Just prior to this session was the inauguration that was, done by Honorable Prime Minister, and this idea is that this session to develop plan of action for the implementation of these missions, also consult expert and stakeholder to understand the challenges and opportunities from these programs and schemes, and deliberate on ways and means to effectively implement them for boosting the economy. Keeping this background in mind, this session is a particular session is being organized on the initiative, our 6th initiative, that is City R&D Cluster for building better synergies among the R&D institution, university and colleges, supported by the government while we retain their autonomy. I once again extend a very hearty welcome to all of you, especially to our distinguished panelists who could find time out of their busy schedule to join today, and look forward to your thoughts and vision for this great initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta, for setting the context for today's discussion. And now, if I may now invite Dr. Aisha Chaudhary from the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor, Government of India, to provide a brief background to this discussion. Over to you, Dr. Aisha.
Thank you so much, Nimita. And morning, everyone. And thank you so much, Dr. Ashutosh Sharma, Dr. Gupta, and big welcome to all the panelists. It's a pleasure to participate in this national webinar, and I will take about next 5 minutes to walk us through the brief background on these formal umbrella structures that have been recently announced in the budget. And I will also try and turn off my video for a moment because I believe there are some bandwidth issues. So just to ensure there's no problem, I'll do that. So as per the recent budget announcement, the formal umbrella structures are being established through the science and technology clusters as conglomerates of various science and technology institutions, including both public and private, to enable better synergy while retaining their autonomy. These are supported by the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India, along with the Ministry of Education, on the recommendation of the Prime Minister's Science, Technology and Innovation Advisory Council. As you can see on the slide, these clusters will create strong linkages between existing networks of academic institutions and national and state research laboratories, along with relevant ministries, industry partners, startups, state governments, philanthropic foundations, and also international institutions of excellence. They will have an independent structure to enable long-term autonomy, financial sustainability, and coordination with external agencies and participating organizations. These clusters will also create a domino effect and provide an institutional mechanism to different stakeholders to collaborate, complement, and build on each other's strengths. And they will eventually feed into world-class product design and manufacturing for science and technology driven solutions for the government, both for state and center, as you can also see it's being depicted on this slide. Can we move to the next slide, please? The three objectives of the clusters can be described using a pyramid structure, as you would see. The bottom of the pyramid is where each cluster has to enable creation of a shared ecosystem, meaning a group of 15 to 20 institutions start working together as one large institution through a formal umbrella structure so that these institutions can have more synergy and they continue to retain their internal autonomy as well. And such a shared ecosystem will entail sharing of high-end labs and equipments through the iSTEM portal, which is already beginning to happen in several R&D labs. It will also allow mobility of researchers through sharing of credit courses for students, very important, across different institutions, which is also mentioned in the recently launched National Education Policy, and also allow exchange of researchers between industry and public R&D labs. Under this shared ecosystem, the clusters will also conduct high quality human resource development programs in partnership with the industry experts. Now, the middle of the pyramid where you see focuses on clusters becoming regional solution providers to local bodies, state governments, industries, thereby creating a regional influence by solving local problems. For this, they may partner with local incubators, connect with state science and technology councils, and innovation societies. And such problem solving will enable them to create a regional influence in high quality research, development, and innovation. And the third objective you would see at the top of the pyramid, which will allow each cluster to focus on 1 to 2 domains of key strength and build strong capability to become a national and global leader in it. They would contribute to national missions of the government of India and global mega science projects and thereby become nationally and globally competitive. So in summary, the goal would be to empower them to develop a shared ecosystem, become a regional solution provider, and also become nationally and globally competitive. Now, 6 pilot cluster frameworks have been initiated with the support from the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor in cities that already have a critical mass of S&T focused institutions apart from well-developed diverse industries. And the support that is being provided is through seed grants, which can work as glue grant to facilitate the establishment of these clusters as formal umbrella structures. These cities, as you can see, include Bangalore, Pune, Hyderabad, Jodhpur, Bhubaneswar, and Delhi NCR. Next slide, please. So to summarize, the larger goal here is that the clusters will create a paradigm shift for the scientific enterprise of India and also enable ease of doing science. They will empower our science and technology enterprise to solve R&D problems of industry in India and globally. The goal is also to transform the perception of science for the masses, specifically making science research a prestigious career option and also attracting international S&T talent to India. So clusters essentially will be an institutional solution to creating enabling structures, providing incentives, putting processes in place and creating a culture to improving the innovation efficiency and the overall return on investment in science. So in summary, they are being developed on the lines of global models of the Catapult, Maxwell, Fraunhofer, and the key here is to consolidate, collaborate, focus, and build towers of excellence that will conduct impact science. I'll stop here now and hand it back to Nimita. And we're, like I said, really looking forward to some very interesting thoughts and ideas from all our panelists, specifically on the challenges that we envisage and what would be these potential solutions for implementing such an integrated approach towards science and research and education. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Aisha, for highlighting the objective structure and dynamics of these S&T clusters as conceived by the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor. And with this, I would like to invite Professor Ashutosh Sharma, the Secretary, Department of Science and Technology, for his opening remarks. Over to you, Professor Sharma.
Good morning. Aisha has indeed described very well what the cluster means and what it would be able to achieve. So the kind of activities that are envisaged through the cluster, which cannot be done through an individual institution, whether it is university, R&D lab, or any of the other things, industry, startups, international partners, and so on. So that's all fantastic. And I think that this would truly be transformational in putting down the missions that are not possible to be done by a single entity. This would allow sharing of resources, at least at 3 different levels. These are informational resources, human resources, and infrastructural resources, which are all in the same city, so would therefore avoid needless duplication through different projects, and it would bring in certainly additional muscle in all of it. So now very quickly, what is it that we want to discuss here? The first point that one could focus on is what are the governance and coordination mechanisms for such a cluster which integrate, but with autonomy. It's a light touch structure. Nobody really feels that that they have lost anything. In fact, it has to be a win-win proposition. So what would be an effective structure that would make it possible? So that structure would be, of course, there would be one at the city level, but there would also be one, let us say, some kind of national coordination mechanism. Now, remembering that this kind of cluster has members which are of very different nature, R&D labs versus universities, IITs, ICERs, industry, and startups, and also line ministries that would have interest in such a cluster. Now, what are the kind of activities that would get driven preferentially, and how do each member of the cluster actually gains? To give you an example, whole lot of R&D labs are very good in infrastructure. They traditionally have had more money, for example, but they may not have as many PhD students, and they have no thrill and excitement of teaching there, for example, undergrads. So this is what happens when you join R&D lab with a university. The university gains access to infrastructure, and the R&D lab gains access to PhD students and indeed other students and teaching activities. What then we are looking at here some what is called the glue to bind it all, and of course the real glue is always, we have to think about mechanisms of incentivization, but of course the money. Money is a good glue. So how that could be purposefully directed? What could be the monitoring and implementation mechanisms? How do we bring in a little bit, what is considered traditionally outsiders to this kind of activity? These outsiders are industry, it could be retired scientists and line ministries. How do we kind of incentivize or in a sense encourage and interest them in participating in this kind of activity? So in a sense, in fact, Honorable Prime Minister in the last session said, look, I think the time for policies and philosophy is long past us. What we want to do now is get down to the roadmap, action map, structure, processes of how best this cluster could be implemented. What are the next steps? Unfortunately, we have little time here, perhaps 5 to 7 minutes for each one of us. So we could sharply focus on some or all of these aspects, not necessary to have everything, but if you think that there is a particular focus that you would like to bring forward, one or two of these aspects, that would be very valuable. And anyhow, after this meeting, we can jot it down, a little bit longer version, bullet points in terms of actions and roadmaps. And so we are indeed very grateful to all the panel members who bring their deep wisdom here in this matter, which is of great importance. I haven't any doubt that this would be so. I would not like to call it disruptive because that may have negative connotation, but certainly would be transformational. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sharma, for sharing the criticalities around S&T clusters and introducing the relevance of Blue Grant in this context. With this, we come to the end of the first segment. I would now invite Dr. Soumya Pathak, one of the co-moderators, to initiate the panel discussion. Over to you, Soumya.
Thank you so much, Nimita, for setting up the stage. Namaste and a very good afternoon, good morning to one and all. I am Soumya. I welcome you all for the panel discussion on harnessing education, research and skill development for an Atmanirbhar Bharat. As Dr. Aisha mentioned, the discussion today will be focused on the context of using Blue Grant to develop educational hubs to promote innovation, research and development in the country. In this context, we look forward to getting insight from our expert. I'm extremely elated and excited to start the discussion session with our esteemed panelists who have joined us today. Welcome all. So without any further delay, now we are opening this segment. I request our panelists to please limit their interventions for only 5 minutes, keeping into the consideration of limited time frame. So to start with, I would like to request our first panelist, Mr. Naushad Forbes, sir, co-chair Forbes Marshall, to share his thoughts. So over to you, sir. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Soumya. And first of all, I want to just welcome this initiative. It's a very important initiative for us as a country, and we're delighted to participate in it. I also want to mention one other thing, which is that, I unfortunately have to leave half an hour early today. So my apologies in advance. But when Akhilesh asked me to be part of this program day before, I said, well, any program that is being organized between Professor Vijay Raghavan's office and Professor Ashutosh Sharma's office is one that I have to be at. And it will be an initiative and a program that will be important for us as a country and an initiative that we can all welcome and participate in. Let me very specifically address the questions and thoughts that Ashutosh, you mentioned just now, which I think are exactly the direction that we have to go in. And first of all, I'm delighted that Pune is one of the cities. So let me apply the concept to the cluster of Pune. And a thought is that what if we were to bring together, say 20 companies in Pune that are quite technologically intensive, that invest significantly in R&D themselves, together with Aisha. We have an Aisha in Pune. We have a College of Engineering in Pune. We have NCL in Pune. We have the ARDE in Pune, the ARD laboratory in Pune. And we have also a Bharat Electronics BEL facility, which does a lot of R&D as well. So there are several institutions that if we start meeting on an ongoing basis, I think we start by understanding what facilities we each have. So in terms of sharing of equipment and facilities, and more than anything else, we start sharing problems that we have. What are those issues that we are trying to address and solve ourselves, which others can then participate in and help with? I'd like to then suggest one more general principles that we could pursue as we roll this out across the country, which is that the normal way in which interaction happens, it seems to me worldwide, between R&D done in firms and research done, public research that's done, is through the educational system. It's and to come back to the point that Professor Sharma made just now as well, that it's done actually through students who graduate from these institutions and go off and work for companies. When they face a problem that they cannot solve, they say, okay, how do I solve this problem? So they ask people around them, and if they can't find the solution, they call their professor in their institute that they've passed out from and say, can you help me solve this problem? And if he or she can't help solve the problem, then they say, yeah, okay, but we can do a research project and answer the question for you. And so that becomes then an automatic linkage that exists. So the more that we can connect the work that's done in public research through the educational system, the more durable it will be, powerful it will be, and consistent and continuous it will be. So with that in mind, I have 3 specific thoughts. First, how can we in industry help with the quality of students passing out with both masters and PhDs, maybe also bachelors, but masters and PhDs who would be directly relevant to the research effort from the Aisha, from COEP, and NCL, for example, in Pune runs a PhD program, one of the larger PhD programs in chemistry and chemical engineering in the country. Second, can we connect with faculty in their particular research areas and arrange maybe even faculty sabbaticals? And can we use some of these grants for faculty sabbaticals to take place in industry, maybe for 3 months at a time, where faculty from the colleges and researchers from the autonomous laboratories can spend time in industry? Because if they know what the problems are that industry is challenged with and working on, they will be much more, it seems to me, much more able to solve those problems. And third, can one set up something where every scientist at our national labs, at NCL, at the ARD, etc., that every scientist at our national labs teach, where they teach a course, maybe together with an existing faculty member in an engineering college, in a science program, and can we use the grants that we have to incentivize this? Because if we can use the grants to incentivize this, we can enrich the quality of talent that the wider educational establishment comes out with, which will benefit the country more in the longer run than, it seems to me, any other single effort. So what I would do is to put my hand up to say, I'd be very happy to help get 20 leading companies together in Pune, together with these labs in Pune, together with the ISER in Pune and the College of Engineering here, and see how we can start an ongoing engagement such that we can then identify ways, first, of getting to know each other better, and then second, finding ways in which we can contribute to the success of each other's endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your detailed insight into the landscape to uplift the research and innovation scenario by industry-academia partnership. So next, I would like to request Professor A.K. Sood, sir, Honorary Professor, Indian Institute of Sciences, Bengaluru, for your thoughts. So over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear
Okay,
you.
great. So thank you very much to all of you to make me a part of this very important discussion. So actually a very clear and succinct message has already been given, the purpose of this Blue Grant by Dr. Aisha Chaudhary and Ashutosh Sharma. So I will only be brief because I have 5 minutes. I'll just make few bullet points to reiterate some of the points and add few thoughts of my own. So one thing is that this initiative is being done for the first time in the country. I mean, we are not used to engaging with multi-institutional framework usually. So this is a very new initiative. So the key point will be the management structure and the support structure, as well as the decision making in these clusters. So it has to be very flexible. It has to be done with a lot of sensitivity, and it has to be a continual program of engagement. So the only thing which I would like to add is that we must make effort in these clusters to have gender equity and other inclusions. Yeah, we must be conscious of it, and we make sure that in all our efforts, this is not missed out. And as it was already mentioned, which is again I will iterate, the entrepreneurship engagement in this cluster will be a very important thing. Now, second point is in the shared ecosystem, which has also been very well articulated in the concept note which Dr. Akhilesh Gupta sent to us. The only thing which I would like to re-emphasize again are 2 points. One, a very serious engagement with the college teachers and engineering colleges, if possible with medical colleges also, uh, in this cluster, because somehow I always feel that a huge resource as in these places is not used. So I also mean the very good colleges which are there in each city. So this part, I think consciously we have to do it. We have to see that they are not left alone to feel, unwanted or the smaller partner. So the engagement with college teachers, which is very important to enhance research culture, as was mentioned in the first part of our meeting with the Prime Minister. This has to be done. It will enhance research culture in colleges and smaller universities. So this is something which I would say should be kept in mind. I'm sure it is there, but somehow we have to be very conscious of it. And third part, which I will again emphasize, that each cluster should really define a grand challenge in the first 3 years, or let's say 4 years. So it cannot be too many grand challenges, but one grand challenge has to be upfront. You can call it campaign, or you can call it any name you want, thematic unit, or whatever you want to call. But a grand challenge has to be there, which should include many stakeholders, including industry partners, including academic uh, people, and R&D institutes. So I think when we really evaluate these clusters, somehow we have to ask ourselves, has it made any difference by forming a cluster? It is not just the concept of bringing them together. Has one and one become really more than two? Or is it still two? So this somehow we have to tell each cluster that this is one benchmark will be used to really see how these things really shape up. So, in simple words, the grand challenge idea with each cluster. So, if we have 6 clusters, as was mentioned a few minutes back, we must have 6 grand challenges. And these grand challenges really should involve many people in this cluster. So I think if we do that, and if we meet again after 3 to 5 years, let's say midterm evaluation should be done very objectively, and we should make, so this evaluation is a must of these clusters, because these are new schemes, new initiatives. So we must do mid-course correction, because it has a tendency to really get lost if we are not really watching it. So I would say this is one aspect I will like to add. How do we evaluate these clusters uh, performance or their necessity? And these 9 clusters, either the 6 clusters which have been announced, and I'm sure 3 will be announced more, they are not for permanence. It should be made very clear. If they are not performing, if they are not really coming together, we should not hesitate to really change to some other cluster, because there may be many more, other candidates. So I think these are the 3 things which I would say I will simply emphasize and put on board, plus the overarching theme which Ashutosh is very fond of. And I think the clusters can do a marvelous job, city cluster, is in science communication. So this science communication, which probably is there in the concept note, but probably not brought out so clearly, I would say should be very important, because science communication in not only English, but also the local language, will be very unique to city clusters, because this will excite the young people, it will excite the public at large, and really there will be a science culture which will be generated. So, so this science communication should not be lost out in these clusters. So this is what you can call, which in DST you call academic social responsibility or similar terminology, but it will form a part of that. So with this, I would say thank you once again. I did not prepare these slides because the time was too short, but I'll be happy to elaborate if there is a requirement to build up on any of this. But it's a great initiative, and I really look forward to the changes in our science ecosystem in next 2 to 3 years. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for your thoughts regarding putting forth many insights of equity and inclusion, science communication, as well as inclusion of colleges to enhance the research culture. Thanks again, sir. So now I would like to request Dr. R.S. Pawar, sir, Chairman, National Institute of Information Technology Group, to kindly share your thoughts. So over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. And first of all, to Dr. Sharma and all colleagues, great to be on this event. I have to admit that there hasn't been enough time for me to get fully acquainted with the very comprehensive program, but I did want to make one central point around the idea of a cluster, and that's coming from my role as the chairman of the Data Security Council of India, where we've been looking at how to deal with the whole cybersecurity challenge and opportunity for India. And this was actually at the behest of Prime Minister's specific call when he came for the 25th year celebration of NASSCOM, where he said that cybersecurity he saw as a big gap and the industry should step up. So we had formed a team that I chaired on behalf of NASSCOM to study the whole area of cybersecurity. And we formed a team, and then we did an extensive study to look at where have these cybersecurity initiatives, both as startups as well as government initiatives, taken deep root, and what's been the history. And quite quickly, to cut to the core of the issue, we found that three conditions were the joining up of three entities was a precondition to an explosion of activity in cyber security, and that was the academia, quite clearly, for research, and industry, and particularly startups. And third was government. So classic example is Israel, but also in Holland, in the Delta, and of course in parts of US around Washington. So when these three came together, it was only then that we saw a huge range of activities. So the idea of a cluster has been in our head from that time in that format. So I basically wanted to say that DSCI, or Data Security Council, is now engaging with universities and engaging with industry, but I think they're all seeking a kind of a nucleation effort, and I felt that this initiative provides that opportunity. So in a brief discussion with Professor Ashutosh Sharma, we did talk about this, and I just wanted to restrict my few minutes to saying how we could make this possible and how this could be factored into the design as perhaps one implementation, not just the generic model, but one implementation. And I also am the founder of the not-for-profit university, the NIT University, which is now 10 years old in Imrana. And I think we've built a very strong capability in terms of academic work there, offering master's programs to industry, to Infosys and the others. And the undergrad level, also computer science, the largest cohort is already migrating into this field of cyber. Our very first startup in the university was the cyber startup. So the idea I want to put on the table is that initiative coming from any of these three players, whether it comes from government or industry, particularly startups or universities, I think we should consider nucleating places around those ideas rather than just being fair in geography and fair in whatever else. So the whole idea of supporting an idea which promises to form a cluster, I want to leave that thought on the table, because one is to formulate a principle and a method and rules and regulation, geography and so on. But very often there, the trigger or the spur is missing. And I think we're finding places where there are people who are willing to do the initiative of joining up the three players. So for example, if it's Rajasthan state, then the state government in the IT budget should look at X% in cyber. That's a policy I've been promulgating for a long, long time. That every state government, it took us, I remember in the 90s, a long, long time to motivate state government to put IT as a percentage of the state overall budget. And many states, it took many, many years. Last few years, we've been telling every state government that if you have an IT budget, which is 2% or 3% of the state budget, within that put 10% for cyber, because we have to secure our systems. So state governments taking that leadership to be the players who get all their state level systems as the participant, and one or two universities in the state, and then startups. So I'd be more than happy to put together a document on this, but the thought I have is that wherever we see a trigger of action, let's nucleate things around those triggers of action and look at the cluster. And so that's what I wanted to say in my 5 minutes, and I'd be more than willing to talk more of this or put some thought together. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Pawar, for your insightful views regarding the idea of nucleation of ideas rather than geographical or spatial aspects of clusters, and emanating from the idea of triple helix, which is about academia, industry, and state. Thank you so much. And we look forward to your views as we take it forward, this idea. The next panelist, I would request Professor Bhaskar Ramamurthy, Director, Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, to share his views. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on this panel. I want to congratulate PSA's office, PSA and Dr. Ashutosh Sharma also for this initiative. I had some discussions with them in the past on this, so this is not entirely new to me. Let me make 3 points which are based on fair amount of experience within IIT Madras in trying to get clusters to form across departments and so on. And we've had fair amount of success in this. And also some experience in forming national level clusters. One in the use of a very sophisticated instrument, which is very expensive, which prima facie looks difficult to do. How do you share an instrument across vast geography? And the second one is in the area of wireless communications where I work in, where we have a national level cluster working together. So first, let me come to this geographical cluster. I think the idea of the basic, the low-hanging fruit, finding out what all equipment are available in various places, which can be shared, etc., what has been put together in the database, these are all very obvious things to do. But having a list is one thing and getting people to actually share equipment is another. And what we have done within the institute to enable this and fairly successfully is to actually dangle a carrot. We say that we will pay for the annual maintenance contract for the equipment after the warranty period, provided the instrument is used by at least 40% of the time by others. And so you could do something like that in the GLOW grant. You could actually ask for evidence that the person, not everybody likes to share equipment for various reasons. It's not necessarily very trivial. Very often it is, sometimes it can be what you can broadly say selfishness, but at other times there are genuine reasons. It's not easy to find trained manpower to help users and so on, to fund it. So we actually fund that also. To some extent, we fund instrument operators and so on. You can ask for proposals where somebody says, I have evidence to show you that I am actually sharing my equipment. These are the people who have used it from the geographical area in the last few months. And I'm asking, and then you can evaluate them and support for the annual maintenance contract. You can do this on an annual basis or a 2-yearly basis, so that you can, the carrot is removed if if the equipment is not used. So this is one way to actually enable this to happen. Having a list is one thing, but getting it to happen is another. The second point I want to make is you can also ask for research. You can also fund at least seed grants for research, if not only research projects that are proposed by PIs from cluster institutions in a cluster, which would otherwise is not possible to be proposed by either institution alone. That condition is very important. I'll give you an example. CLRI is right opposite IIT Madras. Now, CLRI also does work on effluent treatment. IIT Madras also does work on effluent treatment. A joint project in effluent treatment would not qualify. But something that says, okay, looking for a new use of leather, I'm just being provocative here, new use of leather in cell phones would qualify. Okay, because nobody is using leather in cell phones. It's a huge market. If you can find a very attractive use. So this is what I mean. Okay, so something like that. That would really force people to socialize, to actually learn about each other. And you can't get such good proposals out unless you actually hold joint a lot of meetings where people from both institutions or multiple institutions meet, either at seminars or workshops and so on. So the heads of the institutions will have to do those things to enable such proposals to emerge. This kind of proposals where new ground is being broken, new pathways are being explored, cannot happen without human interaction. It's not easy to do this over email or video conference and so on. So these actually geographical clusters are very important for this. It will not happen. There may be a brilliant idea that could happen if X in Kanpur and Y in Madras can meet, but it won't happen because they don't meet. Okay. The third idea I would like to leave you with is a national level cluster. Somebody also alluded to it. See, I think when you really want to hit the peaks of excellence, you want people to get together who really can do much more when they get together than if they do it alone. People still in India get to various places for multiple reasons. And if you're not at a stage where geography doesn't matter and people locate only based on what it means for their work. In many countries, advanced countries of the world, geography matters much less. People will locate to a place because it gives the best opportunity for them to do their work. Here, many other things are at play. So very often in a country also with subcritical capacity, we have people who can do excellent work together, but who are for various other reasons stuck in different geographies. And I think we have to encourage them to work together. Today, with the kinds of tools that are available, online collaboration tools, and so on, this is very much possible. Very often, these will be in the same specialization. This will not be these new exploratory kind of things which break completely new ground. So an example would be the kind of wireless telecommunication collaboration that I have going, involving 8 institutions in the country at present. where all of us work together. We work on standards together. We work on product development together, test development together, and so on. We just cannot do what we are doing even in ones and twos. Just capacity is not in these institutions. So that is something you can encourage through the GLUE grant. If people come up with really powerful groups, even if it's not interdisciplinary, even if it's not breaking new ground, but just becoming very good at something at a global level, I think we should encourage that. And the last point I would make is we actually did an experiment, and Dr. Ashutosh Sharma is aware of this. We actually said there's an expensive instrument which doesn't make sense to fund to any one institution because it's 30 plus crores. But we actually found out that most instruments today, as you know, are computer controlled, and we found that the instrument can be accessed, controlled, and used very easily from multiple locations across the country. Only the samples will have to be sent to the location where the instrument is located, and they have to have 24/7 instrument engineer operators who can load the samples, prepare the samples, and so on. But we are doing that for an instrument, and there are 8 locations in the country from which the instrument can be controlled and used, and others can go there and use it. And this has been quite successful. Like, we have data on how well it's being used. It's being used 24 hours. We actually have 3 shifts because the instrument starts depreciating when you buy it. And we put skin in the game. We asked institutions to wanted this instrument to put up some amount of the money. DST gave 50%, and then we actually bought the instrument. It's located at Madras, but it could be located anywhere. These are all models. Actually, even instruments can be actually used at a national level. It doesn't have to be restricted to the geography, provided they are really expensive and really need to do that. So these are the limited points I wanted to make, and I would stop here. I hope any further discussions on any of these, I'm quite willing to participate and explore further. Thank you.
Let me come in very briefly. I think the discussion so far has been very enlightening indeed. I just want to inject another dimension into this, which is that let us recall the fact that many of these collaborations within the city already happen. They happen spontaneously, they happen voluntarily, because people are culturally tuned to collaborating, and they see the benefit in it for them. Now, beyond that, when we say, look, that we need to promote collaboration, we need to make use of GLUE grant, we need to do all of that, what kind of structure and processes, in fact, would be needed? Which means, who would decide what to fund, how much to fund? Moreover, what would be the carrot and sticks available to this particular group? How do we bring some amount of empowerment to such a group? So all I'm saying is that we still would need a little extra structure, process. One can even think about that all these institutions which are part of this cluster actually give away voluntarily some of their empowerment to this particular group. So at the end of the day, we would need to bring cohesion. Is part of it is cultural. Also, all I'm saying is people who could do it spontaneously, they're already doing it. So what is it extra that we bring in order to gel this cluster, to use the glue? How much glue, what quantity and quality of glue, and how would it be applied where? Right? So what is the structure, mechanism, processes, if you would, that would be required beyond the voluntary basis in these institutions? I think this would become a critical question eventually in order to implement the things that we are thinking about.
Thank you, Professor Sharma, for adding some more food for thought to this discussion, and thank you, Professor Ramamurthy, for highlighting the relevance of geographical cluster as well as vis-a-vis the idea of wireless communication, how this grant could harness both of them. So with this, I would like to invite Ambassador Renu Paul, Additional Secretary, the NEST Division at Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, to share her thoughts. Over to you, Ambassador Paul.
Thank you. Thank you for including me in this extremely important discussion. I think GLUE grant is a welcome and very timely initiative. And I would like to suggest that looking ahead as we build capacities in disruptive technologies and new emerging and strategic technologies, which is what I'm dealing with, we will need this approach even more than the so-called conventional areas, which of course always remain important. To my mind, such educational and innovation hubs will not be new, as we've also just been reminded by Dr. Ashutosh Sharma, even though many say that the ones outside of India have a better track record. But most agree that in India, we have strong academic strengths in these structures. But broadly speaking, such institutional mechanisms in India have faced the following challenges. Typically, these centers have been located within or mandated to well-established institutions. So even though they were semi-autonomous in nature, they still carried the orientation and at times the baggage of the parent institution, its funding capacity, its capacity in terms of equipment, etc. Second, the success or failure of an interdisciplinary or innovation center is directly proportional to the type of people employed therein. The people have to allow for the kind of operational dynamism which is needed to move towards a multi-stakeholding or interdisciplinary collaborative practice. Otherwise, over time, the center becomes a silo of its own, leaving aside its role as a hub. To my mind, it's now urgent to also acknowledge and give space to the technocrat and his skill set, which is essential to making the cluster approach a reality. Only then can we link academia, research, industry, and connect them to function as one team to act as solution providers for regional or national development. So an umbrella cluster or educational hub will have to address the following in terms of structure and process. The disconnect between the knowledge generators and the knowledge implementers, so that the problems and solutions are not identified in silos. The knowledge exchange between theory and practice is very important. The flow of evidence-based knowledge from the sciences to policy formulation and ultimately to application and implementation without lengthy diffusion times. There has to be incentive for research to meet national development priorities. Implementation methods that allow for monitoring and understanding the effect of innovative solutions. So coming from the external affairs, I would say we need a quad of the government, business, civil society, and academia, wherein government agencies provide the necessary infrastructure, investment, and regulatory incentives. And the universities and the academia ensure the steady flow of skilled human resources, training them further, exploring technology frontiers, and generate new knowledge with a long-term view. The business or the tech companies are very important because they need to become the economic engines of these technology clusters. And the private sector also caters to the large part of capital requirements at the end use stage if this is to succeed. Non-governmental organizations can also be leveraged because they possess a better understanding of regional and social issues which need technology solutions in both rural and urban settings. Now, in the new emerging and strategic technologies division of the Ministry of External Affairs, which is a new division set up last January, we have defined our mandate in exactly this manner, that the division will function as the synapses to facilitate bringing together policy and operational interfaces on emerging technologies between Indian entities and key partner countries and international organizations, foster a well-coordinated position for India on technology governance rules, standards, and architecture that we expect to see in the coming months and years, identify and assess the demand-driven requirements of new emerging technologies in India at the center and state levels, and assess, of course, the foreign policy implications of these resources. So I see a lot of synergy between the operational mechanism of NEST in MEA and the proposed city and educational clusters. And the functioning of NEST can, in fact, be looked upon, if we succeed, as a microcosm of the operational machinery that the city clusters will have to adopt at a macro level. To conclude, I would suggest the following for consideration in specific for the city clusters and for the educational hub in particular. The cluster should be truly autonomous and not be housed within existing structures. It certainly has to link up existing institutional capacities, but it needs to be something above and beyond. Operationalization of chains of interdisciplinarity will be key to avoiding the pitfalls faced by the existing centers that had been mandated previously to perform similar roles. For instance, the hiring of people should be such that the individuals do not supersede the mandate of the cluster or the hub. The mandate has to be delivery focused with specific identified outcomes within a particular time frame. And the mandate should have a private sector orientation, whether it is CSR capabilities or it is the expertise already existing in the industry R&D ecosystem. All of this needs to be integrated in the operations of the clusters or the educational hubs. And industry R&D is geared towards specific deliverables in the midterm to the short term. And they have the technology development trajectory built into them. And the clusters and the hubs will need to imbibe that professionalism of delivery from industry. The clusters should also look to develop operational connect with the diaspora. There are already existing channels of connections through the Prabhas portal, which we have established recently, and the WebHub Summit that was held. But these are tending to get limited to events and an aggregation of suggestions. But the connection with the diaspora needs to lead to tangible deliverables that aligns with our state and national missions. And the cluster should also develop closer synchronization between our own operations and the emerging global framework on technology. Last but not the least, we need to make exchange of faculty and researchers in the educational hub a norm and not the exception. Of course, that will mean working out the IPR, et cetera, the national and international levels. I think this will help to bring efforts together on the synergy of intent and action that we need today between the government, academia, R&D, and industry for innovation. We need a convergence at the regional levels, which feeds into the convergence at a national level. So the city clusters and the educational hub in particular will be a very important enabler for all of this, for raising the TRL levels, so to say, to go beyond the frugal innovation that India is famous for towards a mind-to-market approach. And that sharing of vision, capacity, resources, and outcome will make our innovation sustainable, and I think put India on the map globally as a partner and a leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Paul, for giving such a comprehensive and insightful vision of how we should use the glue grant and how we should build these clusters around the idea of multi-stakeholder partnerships and their defined roles and responsibilities, and also to highlight how the clusters need to be autonomous and interdisciplinary in nature. Thank you so much for your views. With this, I would like to invite Professor K.N. Ganesh, Director, Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research, Tirupati, for his thoughts and viewpoints. Over to you, Professor Ganesh.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and thanks for having me on this panel. I'm speaking more from the perspective of science education and what is the need for hubs for the science education and research. Can I go to the next slide, please? I have sent these ones to all the panelists. Next slide, please. I just, one of the questions which a lot of people ask me is that why do we have to have so many science graduates? Most of them, they go without jobs, and we are not creating the quality thing. The previous, yeah. So one of the things I try to put in, I'm not going to go through the full slide, is that while science has to bring excitement, excellence, it also has to bring relevance. And most of the teaching and research, we already know many of the institutions are producing, good teaching and research, faculty. But what is required is science plus something, that is missing. Now, for example, I think it's already talked about communication. If the science graduates can be given a dose of like journalism, which helps in technical science writing, finance and knowledge of finance and economics, which makes them entrepreneurships, venture capitalists, or management information. They can become good managers, or the administration. And an important thing is to provide them with law, which helps in protection of IPRs, patenting, etc., and technology assessment, doing research. Now, why am I mentioning this thing? Now, no science institute or academic institution can have expertise in all these things. But nevertheless, this should become part of the science training. So this is where the glue concept comes. A science institute can interact, network with other institutions who can provide these things as a one course, one semester course or something like that, which some of the science students might be interested in each of these aspects, and then they can take a specialized course. So the glue concept really helps in giving this additional training to the science. I call them as science enablers. May I have the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Yeah. So here I've just lifted, I have just shown IISc, IITs, IISers, NITs, etc. science institutions. We do want our students to learn about humanities and social sciences, and we can tie up with central universities or institutes of performing arts, music, drama. Many of these things are already requirements under NEP 2020. And law, IPR with some law universities. In fact, very, very difficult to find lawyers who have a science background. So on the other hand, can we reverse it? And traditional knowledge system, there are a lot of good science behind our traditional knowledge system. How do we explore that? Or even give them a small training in management and industry. So in these cases, the institutes can tie up locally or globally, whatever, within the other parts of the country with good institutions. The main thing is that those institutions should custom design the courses for science students. Now, if you want to teach social science to an engineer, you must know what kind of social sciences an engineer requires for his function. So that is very, very important. Many technologies have failed because they did not understand the social aspects of that. So these institutions and the networking partners, we must create a situation in which they understand and design courses for science students. May I have the next slide, please? Next slide. Yeah. Now, what I'm going to tell you is about, this is my last but one slide. Actually, I want to illustrate to you Tirupati, which is known only for Balaji Temple, how it can be a good educational hub. Now, what I'm going to describe to you now today, it is already which is happening. So let us start with the IISer and the IIT axis. Tirupati is the only city which has an IISer and an IIT, two institutes of national importance. So right from the day one, we are born on the same day, and we are already interacting. We are having campus networking, creating common facilities. We are sharing already the courses in terms of the teaching, physics, chemistry, data science, etc. And we have already established what is called as the CAMOST, that is Center for Atomic and Molecular and Optical Physics. Together, two institutes have about 8 faculty. It has just happened. So we are leveraged on this thing. We have already launched the center, and the faculty are interacting. Few publications have already come up. The other thing which we have done is, the Tirupati with Angro, it is Acharya N.G. Ranga Agriculture University. It's a fantastic university in agriculture. IISer has a group on plant sciences, and Tirupati IIT is interested in precision agriculture. So 3 of us have combined together. We already had 2 or 3 sessions to identify how to reach to the farmer, the science and technology to the farmer, right from root plant engineering to nano sensors to better mortars and pumps and for spraying of insecticides, etc. How to bring engineering aspects, how to bring science aspect to the agriculture. We already have 2 sessions, and we have identified the project is moving very fast. So we already have 1 networking. The second networking is with Amar Raja. Tirupati has only 1 manufacturing industry, that is the batteries, Amron batteries. So IISer, IIT, and Amar Raja, we have already combined together in the area of energy. And IISer is interested in making new materials. We have a strong group on that. IIT is interested in the engineering, and Amar Raja, the end users. So energy materials, new energy materials, storage materials, we are already interacting with each other, in industry and engineering and a science institution. There is a second network we have already established. And the third one is with Rashtriya Sanskrit Vidyapith, where in the Indian traditional knowledge system, I must thank our HRM for suggesting this. The IISer, IIT, and Rashtriya Sanskrit Vidyapith, where actually we have identified about 10 areas in Indian traditional knowledge where modern science application becomes very, very important. I'm sure Professor Ashutosh Sharma was also present in one of the meetings, and he would appreciate that. So these 3 are already ongoing network, without anything imposed, essentially driven by individual faculty interests. Now, the IISer already is linked up with SWIMS, Sri Venkateshwara Institute of Medical Science. We are already working on cancer diagnosis, use of mass spectroscopy for diagnosis of cancer, and also in the COVID testing. We also have an Indian Culinary Institute from Tourism Ministry, which are fantastically in food chemistry. So we've initiated a course in food science, along with this institute. So it is in a different ministry. And a very nice hub which we have done is with SV Venkateshwara University, which is on the left-hand down. And we have here roped in a college. Professor Ajay Sood mentioned that we should reach out the college. So we have this PKVN Government College from Chittor, along with Sri Venkateshwara University. We have tied up, along with University of Melbourne, what is called the blended BS course. Now, blended courses are again a part of NEP 2020. We are now helping the good practices of Aisha and the university are being poured into the Chittor, and the teachers are very, very enthusiastic. And so we have already set up one network, and it has been approved by Sri Venkateshwara University, the coursework, etc. Now, the other one is about the science outreach. We are very close to Agastya and Kuppam, and also the Regional Science Center, which comes under Indian Museum Association. So we already have working on several regional science centers. For the last 4 months, I'm sure Aisha, who is here, would remember Agastya Foundation, and we are holding every week 2-hour session with Navodaya School, bright kids, gifted kids, about 20 faculty of Aisha Tirupati involved in a session in the outreach. It's very, very amazing. So we also have IIIT in Srinivasapuram. We have Padmavati University here, and we also have a private university, Kriya. And we are also very close to Sri City, which has about 200 industries. So now, without anything imposing, this is a concept which myself and the IIT, we built up, the director, and we are already demonstrating how in a small place like Tirupati, with the existing institution, depending upon their mutual interest, we can build up a hub. I'm not sure Tirupati would qualify to be in the 9 cities which are being supported, but it is important that the system should also recognize these smaller hubs which can come. And Professor Bhaskar Ramurthy also mentioned about the instrument. Very recently, with the leadership of IIT Madras, Aisha Tirupati, IIT Tirupati, and a host of at least another 3-4 institutions, we bid for a cryo-electron microscope, a very high-end facility that is supported by DST. It is being established. One of the objectives which we have learned is that bringing faculty together is the first step. That is the most important. It should be a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down approach. Now, in all these cases, particularly in the case of agriculture, energy, it is the faculty who are driving, and here it is really becoming 1 + 1 = 11. I thought in this glue, concept, I must illustrate to you how a network can be developed locally. And I hope this comes into recognition, and I'm sure within about 1 or 2 years, some achievements from this will be coming up. Next slide. This is the last slide. Next slide, please. Now, what I've just put is a few things which have already might have been mentioned. One is this glue should enable networking of institutes to make regional educational hubs. In our thing, not only educational, but we also have institutes, we also have industry. There are several things which I have not covered, which we have been thinking. And one must create a separate entity. I think that has already been mentioned, which should be above each of the institute in each region to identify the strength of the institutes, bring them together in an organized manner. And also we must see what are the unmet needs of each institution and recognize and bring the partners together. Establish contact with industry for internship and later career development. Creation of customized courses for the benefit of partner institute. This is very, very important. Network, you must recognize the strengths and the needs of the partner institutes and adopt oneself to that. Now, all these things will not happen with the existing faculty. Some of them are willing to do that, but you require faculty with a slightly different kind of orientation. So we need to hire faculty in each of these institutions to coordinate the networking, people who are really interested in multidisciplinarity, who understand the needs of academic, and the industry institutions. We may have to, because the number of faculty whom we have, they're not enough just for teaching our own regular courses. So in order to get into these kind of activities, we require additional faculty support, and the number of good people are available who are from industry, who are from other institutions. So we have to create a new network, new kind of expertise in this one, internship industry, and bring brand value to the partnering institution. Having this net is already known in Singapore or many UK universities. This networking have brought brand value. One of the good things is that with institutions like Aisha, IIT, tomorrow there is a challenging problem the government poses. We can together, the partnering institutions can together bid for such kind of projects, because expertise may not be present in one institute, it may be present across institutions. So as a hub, we can actually take up those challenges. It has happened in UK, and so there is a very good reason why we cannot do that here. We can rope in industry, etc. So with these thoughts, I leave, and I thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Professor Ganesh, for your views on holistic organic growth in the education system and their interconnectedness by excellence and relevance. by incorporating applied as well as traditional knowledge system for strengthening the R&D. Thanks a lot, sir. So I request all the speakers to please stick to the 5 minutes, so as we have limited time to wrap the discussion. So moving towards next, I would like to request Professor Pankaj Jalote, sir, Distinguished Professor, Indraprastha Institute of Information and Technology.
If I may come in, I think General Kanitkar probably had to go somewhere. She's been with us from the beginning. I'm not sure. General Kanitkar, would you like to come in first?
Thank you so much, sir, but I don't mind waiting on because I have cancelled the other to be here for this whole session. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, ma'am. Thanks a lot, ma'am. So next, I would like to request Professor Pankaj Jalote, sir, Distinguished Professor in the Indraprastha Institute of Technology, New Delhi, for your intervention. So over to you, sir.
Okay. Thanks, Soumya. So since I have 5 minutes, let's get straight on to it. So basically, if you see collaboration, we're talking about clusters to add collaboration. The collaboration is being needed in 2 dimensions. See, research produces knowledge and innovation puts that knowledge to use. And we know that to get relevant knowledge, research has to be multidisciplinary. We know innovation has to be multidimensional and multidisciplinary. So one reason for putting collaboration or enabling collaboration is to ensure that our research ecosystem, which tends to be narrow and small institutes focused around schematic areas, are collaborating. So we have the collaboration for multiple. The second dimension, which is that we have talked about, to generate value at large level, we need industry, we need government, and we need the R&D and the academia. Right? That's the triple. So this city cluster thing is a very nice. It's trying to do both, actually, to do both. And I'm a member of the committee that evaluates it. So I've seen that, and I think it is a very nice model to go forward. But I must say, I feel that this is a first. It is trying, or rather, a good initial step, which should, in my view, pave way for something more bold. And this is so. There's only one point I want to make about that. So as I said, a lot of, if you see all the clusters that have come about, the large majority of participants in that are actually academic institutions. So while industry, so the triple helix talks about the government and the industry and the academic institutions. From what I recall, most of these clusters are really around academic institutions. And that's good because our academic institutions have tended to be narrow and small and didn't really collaborate. But I think we should take this to a logical state forward, where there is some global experience, is that we ought to create R&D entities that are large, that are multidisciplinary, so the energy is not spent in putting these multiple smaller organizations together so they can collaborate before they can collaborate with industry and the government. And so there's during my studies for a book that I was working, I realized that in many countries in the world, and there is a report about where they have created mega research universities by consolidating, by bringing in, by merging colleges, diverse institutions with diverse strengths, by merging labs and various other institutions in it. So as I said, I see this as a good step where people can collaborate of different academic institutions and research labs and the research ecosystem. But the logical step would be to try some actual mergers to create some big entities. I remember somebody mentioned that these clusters ought to be, some superarching structure. Actually, it means some big research university to be created. And I want to just point out two or three global experiences here to suggest that this is something to be tried. Australia in the 80s, I think they had a Dawkins reform where focus was on merging academic institutions and research entities together. And we all know in the last 2 decades or so, Australian universities have done remarkably well in the global sphere. The second I want to point out is the more recent one, which is in France, where we may have heard about France trying to create a French MIT, but that's only one of them. I think they're trying to do the same kind of thing that we're doing, but in 8 cities, trying to create these mega clusters, but into mega research universities. So 8 or 9, I believe I talked to a French person there. But there's a report where consolidation and merging actually has been happening in this R&D scenario where multiple entities are merged to create mega research universities has been happening in hundreds. There are hundreds of such these things. So I hope that this is this very nice initiative to bring people together, where currently a lot of energy is being spent in collaboration of these academic institutions in the same city. Good step, but I hope these in 8, 9 cities, we may also experiment with what France is trying to do, what Australia has already done, is to create mega entities in these cities, which are multidisciplinary with all kinds of R&D people in it, different flavors, different disciplines in it, as well as fundamental, applied, and all those other dimensions in it. And I hope that we can experiment a little bit with it. In India, we've sort of tried by breaking institutions. We've done that. But I think it's time for us to try to merge some institutions together, maybe create in these 8 cities, pave the way to 8 or 9 mega universities, research universities. So I think my 5 minutes are over. This is the single point I wanted to make. Good step. I hope it takes the logical next step, learning from experiences of countries like Australia and France. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Professor Jalote, for your views on collaboration strategy, research university concept, merging mega clusters with research universities. Thanks a lot, sir. So taking this forward, I would like to request Mr. Parmarth Raj Sinha, founder and CEO of Harappa Education, for your interventions. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Soumya. Thank you very much for inviting me, Dr. Sharma and others. It's a pleasure to be here. Enough has already been said, and so I do want to just build on the points that others have made. And I firstly want to commend the initiative. I think it's fantastic that we are doing this. Let me just quickly share with you that when I graduated with my PhD about 30 years ago, I was in the United States and I had no intention of leaving the US when I was approached by a body in the Canadian government called the Institute for Robotics and Intelligent Systems. In those days, there were no websites, so I didn't know what this institute was. I had never heard of it. Then I realized that it was actually in those days called a virtual institute, where having picked robotics and intelligent systems as a theme, the government had actually set up a virtual institute which was across the key universities of Canada and involved several companies as well as public sector units as well. To cut a long story short, I got a postdoctoral fellowship for which I was based in the University of Toronto. So I actually moved countries because it was such an attractive program. I had no intention of leaving the United States. I moved to Canada much against conventional wisdom at that time. I worked at the University of Toronto for some time, and within that system, I was able to also move for some time to Queen's University. There were collaborators across the country from Waterloo, McMaster, Ontario, Alberta, British Columbia, and we worked very closely with Spar Aerospace, which was the private sector company that worked with the Canadian Space Agency to build the Canada arm that used to be on the space shuttle. The reason I'm highlighting this story is that I've personally lived this, and this works very well when it works. And it was a very exciting program. It launched if you will, my academic career, though I later on left my academic career, but I have very fond memories of that time and the level of collaboration and the excellence of the output and the impact that it had. I would like to submit, sir, that one of the big challenges we've always had in India, as you know, is the quality of what we do, either in education or research. To me, this is a huge opportunity for us to reset and to set a new benchmark. You know, when you're trying to improve things in existing institutions, it's almost impossible to do that. It takes generations to do that. I would see this as an opportunity to actually create something from scratch and build something which is very high quality. And I would really request you and beg you actually to set a very high bar for what we are doing here. In the top 10 science research nations of the world, India does not figure. China now is number 2. And again, this is not about India-China comparison, but I don't see any reason why Switzerland should be there and France should be there and we should not be there. Now, if you try to do it through existing institutions, it will not happen in our lifetime. If you are creating this new structure of clusters, then please see it as an opportunity for India's chance to actually reset the bar on research. And to say that, listen, we will not be all things to all people. If I look at all the ideas that we are putting together here, we are being a little bit all things to all people, because that's true for all exciting ideas. And there are no bad ideas. You can do all those things. But I think the single most important focus should be on, can we use this construct to put us in a different league globally in terms of research and harness the best potential of all the people representing institutions and industry or whatever you want in these clusters. To do that, Professor Sharma, you did ask a very pertinent question. If we were setting up a world-class university, for example, or we were setting up an institution of eminence, the main issue is governance and who runs it and who leads it. For that, we can have a separate discussion. There are lots of lessons around that, but I would literally see this as creating a separate governance at a top-notch level of the kind of people you've invited on this call, to put them in the governance and tell them this is what we want to achieve. We want to use these mechanisms and constructs to put India in a different league scientifically, globally. That's your mandate, right? Now, whether you do internships with industry or you do capacity building of faculty or you do clustering, you do it by theme, you do it by geography, I don't care. But what we really want to do is, if this thing has to have impact, then it needs to take us up a few notches in our stature as a country in terms of scientific research. That's my only submission, and I think I've exhausted my 5 minutes. Thank you very much again for inviting me.
Thanks a lot, sir, for your views on the quality of education and research to harness the best potential in the clusters. Thanks a lot. So next, I would like to invite Lieutenant General Dr. Madhuri Kanitkar, ma'am, for your intervention. So over to you, ma'am. Welcome.
Thank you. I don't have any presentations, but I've been listening to some excellent views, and I've found up my points very specific. First, foremost was what we started and heard the Honorable Prime Minister said, what are we looking at? And I thought it's important to say that Atmanirbhar and skilling, I thought that was a very important aspect he brought in, to bring in youth and to give bring in girls. So whatever we decide, I thought, one, we must have a method to glue and get these people into mainstream. That was one. The second point was, and therefore, taking the opportunity of the new education policy, we need to bring in a change which is not just in a modification of the existing system, but a disruptive transformation, both in thought and action. That today's student is geared to pass an exam. So how do we bring about the change of questioning mind? Because education cannot now mean just learn to earn, but it also has to be how to earn. So we have to get that concept through, and therefore I would like to see, even if it's a top down, clear objectives spelled out in this, as to at the end of say 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, how much more have we through our institutions reached out to society in such events and have defined goals which are locally relevant, because otherwise it doesn't become significant. And to achieve this, like Professor Sinha just said, that I have to see what I want to reach at the end of it. So my first step may be that to get it Atmanirbhar, a local or a cause which could be expanded and used nationally would be my first aspect. And towards that, when I look at, there are huge strengths, there are huge opportunities, no doubt, but the biggest weakness is lack of trust. How do I use the glue to bring in trust? The second is, how do I change the attitude from an I to a we? As a doctor, I said, illness to wellness is I has to get out and we have to come in. This doesn't come in when there are each top institutions, independent, capable of doing small collaborations and achieve. So when we put projects through a cluster, it has to be not why you need it, but why can you not do it without a cluster? Which means you have to have participation at every level, from whether it's from students who are doing, the mechanisms can be worked out, where we have faculty moving in and out, where students relate to the real world, not a bookish information. And this becomes more in colleges and postgraduate, where our courses are becoming irrelevant slowly. So I think that would be a first. And as far as there was an excellent idea of faculty sharing, which I'd like to bring in the concept, we've already introduced it in the medical fraternity. We've called it the Sangam project. So that in that, all hospitals who are private practice, those doctors can have become part of faculty as part-time visiting faculty, so that you increase your scope of real life practice of medicine, as well as increase your postgraduate scheme. We've also brought in a scheme of Shreshta, which is for the retired armed forces, and there would be a lot of retired people, because we still have an age factor, and such project need mentors. So therefore, can we bridge that age gap? And I thought that was a concept I would like to give. And the final few points for mechanisms which have to be put into place for this sharing. One is, of course, your carrot and stick, that these grants would be, if organizations and institutes get together to say why only 2 or 3 but all need to do that. Secondly, produce courses which are electives, which are market driven, which are industry driven, so that while I'm doing medicine, I have an elective to do yoga or Ayush or any of these. So bringing in the concept of electives and credits into this at the which would be translating into, and in keeping with the new national education policy, the clusters would need to look at that. Third is to bring in a funding mechanism to bring philanthropy, grant, be able to raise more, because seed funding can be provided. But today, the lack of trust doesn't permit government institutions to work in collaboration with industry. So we need to get the finance aspects in mind. The two things that I should say is important when there are institutions under different line ministries. Am I being heard? Am I heard?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, we are hearing.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Am I heard? Yes, you just faded out. Okay. I thought it's important to develop a mechanism that once institutions are part of the cluster, they don't need separate controls by the line ministries. Because in an inner city, there would be something under the university, something under Ministry of Defense, something under Ministry of Higher Education, and then there would be labs under CSIR, DRDO. So we have to have a mechanism that when they want to work together, no extra bureaucratic paperwork is required. The final, this I think, though we are harping on science today, I think it's brought by the speakers. I think the left brain, right brain need to meet, and electives should permit, including requirement-based courses where you can go from each other. And I think small things like research methodology, making that mandatory for all people, because we are talking of capacity building. And I think in that, if you're making certain aspects and basics of how to go about research, how to develop a science temperament from the early ages. That would also be important, because we are looking at to reach an Atmanirbhar. Then we can sort of really get into a global level. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, ma'am, for your views on mainstreaming youth and girls for Atmanirbhar Bharat, describing Sangam and Shrestha project to bridge the gap, and also, most importantly, change the attitude from I to we. Thanks a lot, ma'am. So now we are reaching towards the end of this session. I would like to request Professor Ashutosh Sharma, sir, chair of this panel, to conclude the session. Over to you, sir.
Yes. So I think we have collected lots of very good thoughts indeed. And I would request everyone here that if we could write them down, very briefly in a way, in a bulleted form, if you would, bringing out the actionable points, and in terms of converting really everything that we said about in terms of actions. Thinking a little bit about how that action would be completed, what would be the weaknesses in completing that action. I would again go back and say what kind of governance, structure, architecture, and processes that we would require to put all of these thoughts into effective actions. All of these thoughts are fantastic, and they would indeed serve the purpose of creating these clusters. I haven't any doubt that if we could empower all that we want these clusters to do, then this would be something which would be very important for the nation going forward. Indeed, there is, of course, the idea of Jalote had pointed out, idea of acquisition, mergers, and so on. People first would have to get comfortable with the idea before that stage comes. We are a democracy, and so on. So while the future of some of this stuff does reside in mergers, no doubt about it, in order to create a single legal entity. I haven't any doubt that even today, if you were to merge two R&D labs, a university, and one IIT or Aisha in a city, that would come into top 100 universities of the world. It would just pole vault in there. And a lot of people, it indeed happens that many countries are indeed pursuing that strategy and is showing results already. I mean, after all, you cannot match the muscle. I mean, 4 universities really being counted as a single university. There's a bit of cheating involved there, no doubt, but we are not getting into the cheating aspect of it. We are getting into how to make things more effective aspect of it. So thank you indeed very much. We are indeed very grateful for this discussion. I would make now a very quick summary of all of this, which I need to present to a larger group in about 10 minutes or half an hour or something like that. So we'll get some of it, and then what I jot down here, we would share with you as well. And then you can share other things back with us. Thank you again. We will, perhaps we should keep this, kind of standing group. We meet couple more times until we fine tune all of these ideas, until we converge on some action points in the structure. This is a very good, foundational meeting. Yeah. So, okay, can we, and then,
Sure,
some of us go for lunch, some of us go for making notes and enjoy whatever it is that you're going to be doing now.
Sure. Well, thank you, Professor Sharma, for summarizing today's meeting. I think we leave with a sense of optimism that we'll take this forward in subsequent meetings and make our way forward on this. And before we close this session, I would like to invite Dr. Rabindra Panigrahi from Department of Science and Technology to give the formal vote of thanks. I would request all the panelists to keep their cameras on, because in this new normal, we would be taking virtual photographs and snapshots to, remember this moment so that we could revisit. So over to you, Dr. Panigrahi.
can't hear you.
Dr. Panigre,
Yeah, I can't hear at all.
Can I give the vote of thanks while you take the picture? Okay, well, there he is.
yes, yes.
Not audible.
Okay. Well, I think, we can't wait too long now. So let me just repeat what I already said. Very thankful, first of all, to the DST team, PCPM, Akhilesh Gupta and his team, which always does a wonderful job. As many of you know that they've been driving this formulation of new policy, science, technology, innovation policy 2021. It started as policy 2020, but it's gone into 2021, which is actually good. I mean, it's going to be a good, solid policy. We should thank them. And indeed, thank each and every one of you for your very compelling thoughts and at a very short notice. Because all of this really started a couple of days ago. So if you receive this invitation very kind of late, just day or two in advance, it's not because you were the only one, but the whole group here actually were contacted only a couple of days ago. So thanks very much. Let's continue this dialogue. Let's continue to evolve our ideas about this, and let us share them going forward. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Sharma, for putting this very unconventional way of doing vote of thanks from your side. And from our team, we would definitely like to propose this thanks to all of you for joining us today and giving some really interesting, insightful, and enriching discussion. Let this discussion go ahead in subsequent days and meetings. So we take forward for that. Have a great day ahead. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye everyone. Bye everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
I would request the
Bye-bye.
host to kindly stop the live streaming.
Yes, live streaming will be stopped now.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining.